Okay, before we dive into McVay and the Rams, trading Stafford, can I tell you about my friends at RexMD? Over 30 million men in the U.S. tackle erectile dysfunction every day. The doctors at RexMD evaluate you online. No office visit needed. You never have to sit in a waiting room. You never have to be embarrassed with people looking at you. You just go online, get with a doctor, they take care of you. And here's the thing. Unlike other brands, RexMD is FDA approved, clinically tested, and U.S. licensed pharmacy. You'll be getting FDA approved erectile dysfunction treatments at a 90% cheaper rate than the doctors. Yes, 90% cheaper. It's fast, simple, and cheap. You can access your U.S. licensed RexMD physician anytime you need afterwards. Very easy, all online. Act now to take advantage of their best deal by heading to rexmd.com/3and-out. Our exclusive deal will save up to 90% off, where you'll pay as low as $2 per dose on generic Viagra instead of $90+ on Viagra. Starter packs of generic Viagra or Cialis are now available for our listeners to get started. That's rexmd.com/3and-out for up to 90% off plus a free gift. Your partner will thank you later. One thing I saw when John Gruden came back to the Raiders, and this was always the knock on him with his first stint with the Raiders and then with Tampa. I think, ironically, because they worked together. Al Davis had this. George Steinbrenner had this. Some executives or coaches or owners can be very fickle and can be very herky-jerky and can turn on people and players fast. And I think part of being a good coach, being a good executive, being good really in any industry, sometimes you got to have some patience. And sometimes you have to, and this goes back to the Lamar situation, if you're having success, still be able to separate the success and what's best for the long-term health of the business, or if this is a good decision, because it's easy to make prudent decisions sometimes when you're struggling. Sometimes, you can look past it when you're having success, and vice versa. Sometimes you make desperate decisions when you're struggling, and they can all come back to bite you in the ass. It's why when you see Belichick, when you see, I think Andy Reid's the great example of this now, there's a consistency to them. It's not just patience, but it's just, I'm not trying to sprint every single day. And listen, I think sometimes when you're younger, we naturally can be a little more impatient. And I think I know this personally speaking, as I've aged, I've become more patient. I think a big part of that is perspective and just understanding that not everything is the end of the world and not everything has to happen immediately, even in the world we live in 2023. So when I see that Michael Lombardi report that Matt Stafford can be traded, I go, there is a herky-jerky nature. When it comes to the Rams, it's not just Les Snead. They are a Sean McVay operation. Everything that happens with them, with their coaches, and definitely their roster, he's signing off on. So when they get rid of Jared Goff, when they sign Allen Robinson, when they trade for Stafford, and then they extend them, he's all behind this, giving double thumbs up. So a year later, after they win the Super Bowl and they give this guy a massive extension, for them to be thinking about trading him, McVay already sour on the guy? It's starting to feel like Sean McVay has some LeBron James tendencies. I think Sean McVay is an excellent football coach, just like LeBron James, one of the greatest athletes of my lifetime. But do any two humans sour on, in LeBron's case, teammates, now he's also the pseudo general manager, in Sean's case, his players, faster than those two? That one day they love you, one day they need you, and the next day they can't wait to kick you to the curb? It's pretty crazy. And listen, it's sports. Some guys have bad games. Some guys have bad seasons. But just last year, Sean McVay was pounding the table for Allen Robinson. They gave him $15 million a year. Now they can't wait to get rid of him. Sean, Matt Stafford, here's the thing. Clearly he's got some elbow issues, right? He had him last year, was leading the league in interceptions. The entire league knows that. If you're listening to this on March 10th, in 7 days, Matt Stafford is guaranteed, if he's on the roster, $57 million. So you're basically giving him $60 million. Anyone who trades for him who has to give him $60 million and guarantee it. We just saw Matt Ryan, who obviously is not as talented at this point in time in his career, but just on the other end, making a lot of money, and it was a disaster. I don't think there's any team in the league with the concern about his elbow that is trading for him at that price point. But what uncertainty has changed since a year ago today? And Sean McVay has to find a way to be a little more patient with his operation, because he just turns on these guys, it gets out there, and then, it just becomes an enormous story. And they're going to get to the point where there's no turning back, and I commended him. Like most people, it worked. Trading picks for players, Jalen Ramsey, trading for Matt Stafford. It worked. They constantly had success. But this constant just like getting rid of guys and souring on guys is not a sustainable way to operate. You just, especially when you're paying them large amounts of money, because sometimes you're going to get stuck with these players. And I think Sean McVay, one thing he has to mature on as he gets older, if he stays as a coach and doesn't leave to the broadcasting profession, is to find a way to get a little more patient. Because right now, when things stop going well, which as they did last year, this is not going to be a sustainable model. If I was a Jets fan right now, I would be pretty excited. Because not only does all signs point to us getting Aaron Rodgers, it feels like we might not even need to give up our first-round pick to get him. And this gets back to the Stafford thing, a huge variable in Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers' contract right now was $28 million, the rate, a ton of other teams would be involved. But you're basically giving him $60 million the moment you trade for him. And that's what you're going to have to pay him. And it's a complicated situation. But because of his contract, it makes him actually a little easier for them to acquire. And I had recently a Colts fan shot me a DM. And he's like, do you think we should just sit where we're at instead of trading up to get a quarterback? Because when you look at all the recent history of teams that traded up to get quarterbacks, from RG3 to Trey Lance to Carson Wentz, a lot of them have backfired. And when you've looked at teams that just stood pat, right? The Chargers are a good example. They just waited. Justin Herbert fell in their lap, and now they're doing cartwheels every single day because Justin Herbert's on their team. Hell, even Belichick didn't budge, got Mac Jones, not the biggest fan of, but he didn't have to trade any assets to get him. Justin Fields and Trey Lance, beside the 2 picks that were used, traded a total of 3 first-round picks to move up to get those 2 guys. So when you trade a lot of first-round picks for quarterbacks, one, there's no guarantee in football using a first-round pick on a quarterback is ever going to work. The Jets know very well. They just used the number 2 overall pick on Zach Wilson a couple years ago. It's been a disaster. What's funny is I was on a walk the other day, and I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah's podcast. And for those of you that don't know, I know DJ because when I first got hired with the Eagles, DJ was on the staff. And then when I became the West Coast scout, the reason I became it is because DJ had been the West Coast scout. He took the job with the NFL Network. And he was telling me he was pushing for me to get that job. I begged and pleaded, and I got the job, and we've been buddies ever since. And I text him. I'm like, because in their podcast, they were talking about Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. I'm like, when you first came into the NFL, and that's like 20 years ago, do you think that guys like Levis and Anthony Richardson, what round would they have gone in? Like the 4th? And he's like, yeah, at best. And obviously the world has changed. And guys, we're talking 20 years ago, those guys are 4th, 5th round picks. And now these guys, both guys are going to be top 10 draft picks. So there's no guarantee with anything with a quarterback. So if I'm a Jets fan, clearly the Packers are moving on. Don't blame them. Time for Jordan Love. Start a new era. Aaron Rodgers, 39. Let's just go our separate ways. But this notion that they're a little desperate, well, that's true. But getting Aaron Rodgers, who still is very healthy and has won 2 MVPs in the last 3 years, you just can't do any better unless you're going to end up with fucking Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert. And the chances of that happening in the draft, you just thought it was going to happen with Zach Wilson, and it's the complete opposite. The guy can't complete a pass. I mean, the guy can't throw a slant route. If Aaron Rodgers is on your team in the next week, it's got to be one of the great moments, even if it's just a short-term thing, even if it only lasts a year or two. That excitement dwarfs you guys getting Brett Favre years ago because of how well this guy is playing. And if he signs off on this, he's going to have a lot to prove. A lot of people are going to be betting against him. I personally think there's a very good chance of it working. Now, the one concern would be is that one knock last year was like, it took a while for them to get going because he's not great with young players. And it took a while for Christian Watson, who by the end of the season looked really good, right? And not Joshua Dobbs, but Romeo Dobbs, whoever, the wide receiver from Nevada. It just took a little time. Like, he kept throwing to Randall Cobb. He is going to be immediately dealing with two younger players, right? The Ohio State wide receiver, Wilson, and Elijah Moore. Now, third and second year guys, but this is not exactly Jordy Nelson and Devontae Adams in year 7 and 10. So that to me is the question mark. Will he play in the offseason? I would mandate that if I was the Jets, even though you quote unquote can't mandate. It's like, listen, Aaron, no problem giving you a lot of money. No problem making this trade. We're just going to need you to come in OTAs and work with our guys. But if you get them, like, I think you immediately have to put the Jets as, a Super Bowl contender. A Super Bowl contender. A lot of unknowns. Like, I wouldn't have them above, obviously, the Chiefs, the Bengals, or the Bills, but I'd like their chances. I'd like their chances a lot. And last but not least, I think the Geno contract was incredible for a lot of reasons. One, and I talked about this the other day on the podcast, it's cool when a guy, it takes him a little while to fulfill his dreams or fulfill his potential. I actually think it's very relatable. Most of us, no matter what business you're in, don't just strike oil and, immediately in your profession. In pro sports, if you have a 15-year career, by the time you get to year 7, 8, 10, right, in that range, like, it feels like you've been in the league a long time. And Geno Smith came in the league a long time ago, and it took him till last year to have a big-time season, and then he got paid. But I think part of the reason Seattle felt very comfortable about giving him $50 million, which compared to Daniel Jones, he threw double the amount of touchdowns as Daniel Jones. Now, we could argue they got much better receivers, whatever, but still, like, Geno Smith, much more explosive passer than Daniel Jones for $30 million less. Is that Geno immediately went on record and said, if they draft a guy, I will immediately mentor him and do whatever I have to do. Guy like Geno Smith, and I said this like Alex Smith, they are the ideal bridge quarterbacks. Now, you got to pay him a little more than like the $10 million guy, obviously. But one, you can win with them. Or in Seattle's, like, win big. Probably not, but they could make a wild card again. No problem. And two, they are great influences on what Seattle's probably going to draft, an Anthony Richardson, a Will Levis. I would put money on that. And that guy is going to be able to redshirt. And that guy is going to be able to watch a guy who has seen good times, got paid $50 million, and seen shitty times, been cut, been made fun of, hasn't been very good. And that guy has not just perspective, but just an understanding of what it takes and can give him a lot of different areas of advice, right? Not just, this is what it's like to be a $40 million. What could Peyton Manning really tell a backup quarterback beside how to kick ass, take names, and print cash? I'm here to dominate. It's not really that relatable to the majority of guys. Besides, like, being a good guy, I'm not saying he can't relate, but from a football perspective, most quarterbacks who backed up Peyton Manning couldn't do what he did on the field and could never relate to the wealth and the power he had in the organization. Geno's coming at that from a completely different perspective. It's why I think Alex Smith was an incredible mentor. Listen, having Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger tell you about stocks is awesome. But having a guy that, like, lost it all in the 2008 crash and then battled back to be successful by the end of, the decade, and by 2019 had built back up his portfolio, I want to talk to that guy. Like, I want to find out what he did, right? I want to find out about his mindset. Like, there's a lot to be learned there. So I think Seattle not only did the right thing by re-signing him, but now is in an incredible position to draft a quarterback really high and let him sit and let him learn and let him just kind of figure it out. Now, there's no guarantee that guy's going to be any good, but he's going to be in a situation where not only is he nurtured, he gets to watch, but it's not uncomfortable. And any young person, and I say this all the time, think about whatever job you have that day when you walk in for the first time. It's kind of intimidating. You don't know that many people. You don't really know how the day's going to go. You don't really know where the bathroom is. You just kind of got to feel your way out. Even that first 6 months, there's just a feeling out process. And anytime, and anyone who's listening to this can relate to, like, when you meet someone who is in a position of authority, who takes you under your wing, how easy it is to become comfortable fast. How easy it is to, when I moved to Philadelphia, I had lived in California my entire life. Right when I moved there, a couple younger guys on staff who were above me in the pecking order. Still friends with them today. They're crushing it. I mean, they're both of them having a lot of success. And it's just easier to transition into a new job when you have people to lean on. And I think Geno is going to be that guy for Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. And while Seattle, to me, Seattle's winning 9 or 10 games next year, especially when you look at the landscape of the NFC. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a great weekend. Talk to everyone soon. See ya.